Guys, it's Moody here, and I know a lot of you guys have been asking me to do a Little Cup sort of video to help you better understand how Little Cup works. And I've also been getting questions here and there just regarding the rules and what's banned. So I figure I'm gonna make one little segment now that's going to discuss the basics, which includes the rules and what's banned and whatnot, and then I'm going to make like a series of videos, and in the other one I can discuss how EV spreads are determined and natures and some sets I like to use. So I think that if you really want to get into Little Cup, that's one thing that would probably really help you a lot. And I'm gonna go into how I started off Little Cup, I suppose, and just to help you guys who want to learn more about Little Cup and don't necessarily want to read Smogon's whole thing on it. It's not really that long, but I feel like I like listening to a person explain it as opposed to reading, but it's up to you, really. I'm gonna leave the whole Smogon thing in the description. So, the reason I got into Little Cup battles was because I adored the sprites for a ton of the Pokemon. I always love to see something that's not like an overused Ferrothorn, a Tyranitar, or a Gliscor, for instance, because I've seen them so often. With the exception of Ferrothorn, I've seen Tyranitar and Gliscor just so often in 4th gen. And in 4th gen I played some Little Cup, but not as much as I did now. Even seeing a Ferroseed sprite spin around was honestly one of my favorite things ever. I think its sprite is just so adorable. Apart from them being visually pleasing, I also love the minimal amount of time that each battle took, because in Little Cup you'll hardly find a stall war happening. There really isn't much stall. They're fast-paced games. Most of my Little Cup matches only last me about 10 minutes, because they're usually 5 minutes when I speed up the time. And Little Cup also strays away from one of the most used things in Black and White's overused metagame, and that is weather. Just like in the lower tiers, weather needs to be set up traditionally via Rain Dance or Sunny Day, because Vulpix is banned, so there is no drought, there is no drizzle, so for me personally, it piques my interest because there's the challenge of setting up weather and putting it into the limited amount of moves that can be used. You set up weather, you have max, I think it's 8 turns if you're holding a rock, and I think it's 5 just alone, and it's you're confined to those specific 5 or 8 turns, and I feel like that's a lot more challenging than having just rain up the whole game. In my personal preference, I prefer that over what's been going on in overused now. So those are my preferences with Little Cup. So let's start off with basic rules. Like all other tiers, I turned to Smogon for the standard rules of Little Cup, and like I said, I'll leave a link in the description. So I'm gonna open up Smogon here. Hold on. And this is a post I just took from there, and I'm just gonna go ahead, give you all the information now for those of you who aren't aware. So the basic rules are, obviously you're allowed up to 6 Pokemon that, first of all, they need to be able to evolve. No SKYPE, that's at level 5, cough, and also Rotom forms. Someone asked me this before. Rotom forms do not count since they don't evolve, they merely have a different form. The Pokemon must be at the earliest evolution stage attainable, which means if you have, let's say, Charmander, Charmeleon, and Charizard. Obviously, you cannot use Charmeleon because the tier for that is not fully evolved, and in Little Cup, the earliest evolution stage obtainable is Charmander, and that is all that you're limited to. Obviously, the Pokemon must be at level 5, and there are exceptions which are on the Ubers list. There's obviously the species clause, which applies to almost every tier, which means one Pokemon may be on a team from each species. And the Ubers are Scyther, Yanma, Sneasel, Murkrow, Tangela, and recently Vulpix. I remember in 4th gen, Meditite and Mischievous, I believe, were Uber, but for this metagame, they are no longer Uber, for those of you that are wondering. The ones that I listed off are the only Ubers. So, abilities, items, and moves. The ability Moody is banned. Haha, Moody. That's where I think you have, after every turn, one of your stats increases while you lose another one, which also includes evasiveness, so that ability is banned. Pokemon in Little Cup are allowed to hold items, such as any Pokemon in a match. The item clause is not in effect in a Little Cup, however, obviously if you want to play with item clause, that's something that you and your opponent both need to agree on. It's not a standard. Multiple teammates can hold the same item, and the item Berry Juice is banned. That is the only item that is banned. People keep telling me or asking me whether Eviolite is banned in Little Cup. It is not banned. Eviolite is not banned. You are free to use Eviolite if you so choose to do so. The reason being, I feel like it's a great addition to Little Cup. Otherwise, I mean, the game just transferred over. You're gonna have a lot of Pokemon that just carry Oranberry, Life Orb, and a Choice Scarf. You don't want to use leftovers in Little Cup, but I'll explain that in the whole EV thing and whatnot. See, the thing is, I don't know why people just think it's broken, but right now, Eviolite is not banned, and I personally prefer playing with it. But if you and your opponent also agree not to use Eviolite, I've done that in certain instances, that's perfectly fine too. But under standard rules, Eviolite is not banned. Pokemon in Little Cup can use nearly any move available to them at level 5. All non-genderless Pokemon can use their level up moves, and genderless Pokemon can use any 3rd generation level up move in conjunction with any TMs. See, the way this works out, people have asked me about this too. How can Machop learn Dynamic Punch if it only learns it at a higher level than level 5? See, Machop can be either male or female, which means it has a gender, and Pokemon that do have genders can use their level up moves. However, the genderless Pokemon are not allowed to use their level up moves, the exception of 3rd generation moves, which is Ruby, Sapphire, Emerald. That's where I started. And there's also a list of combinations of illegal movesets, like I know Belly Drum Linoon with extreme speed is illegal because it's technically unobtainable, and the link to that is in the article I'm reading off. However, I'm going to also put it in the description right under the Smogon link. And this doesn't really apply to too many Pokemon. It's mainly generations that are like 4th and 3rd and whatnot. So there's the one-hit knockout clause, which is basically standard for everything. No sheer horn, no sheer cold, horn drill, guillotine, fissure, and whatnot. Moves that just kill you in one move are banned. There is no evasion raising moves such as double team or minimize. That is also banned. Moving on, there are the sleep clause, where one Pokemon is put to sleep. That also applies to standard. There is self-knockout clause, and if opponent uses self-destruct or explosion with their last Pokemon, they lose regardless of the number of Pokemon remaining on the other team. That is I think that's always been a standard. And one thing that's just like, technically, if like your last Pokemon uses explosion and your opponent has a Pokemon that dies to the explosion, technically it's a draw. I mean, like, the game declares it as a draw, but technically it's what do you call it? It's a win for the opponent. There was also a thing in what do you call it? The VGCs last year, where the opponent died to his own life orb. So, not the opponent. Yeah, the opponent died to his own life orb. So the person he was battling actually won the match because of that. So Smogon has this whole thing, but I really don't like play to win, so it's not that big of a deal to me. There's the evasion clause, double team and minimized are not allowed. And the EVs I will discuss in the next portion of this, because there is a different EV spread, because like the gap for Pokemon at level 5 is much greater, so you don't need as many EVs to max out a stat. You can use less and put the EVs in another stat, because for some Pokemon you don't need 252 EVs to max out a stat. Like for some Pokemon you can use 200 and max out a stat, and then you have an extra 52 EVs left to put in another stat. That's why the EV spreads for Little Cup are slightly different. The thing is, when I started off with when I started off playing Little Cup, I just put 252, 252, and 5. Obviously, the EV total for Little Cup is still 510, and the max for a stat is 255. But the thing is, you're not required to do that. But when I first started Little Cup, since I didn't really understand how to do it too well, I just put 252, 252, and 4, or just like slight variations of that. And that was perfectly fine because I was just starting off. So anyone that's starting off, you can feel free to put into 252 and whatnot per stat. That's perfectly fine. It's not illegal or anything. And I'll explain it in the next version better than I am now, and I'll give in some examples too to help you explain. But right now, this is basically the rules of Little Cup. The Pokemon that are banned: you're not allowed to use Scyther, Yanma, Sneasel, Murkrow, Tangela, and Vulpix. They're banned unless you want to do an Ubers match, an Ubers Little Cup match. I still haven't tried that. I wouldn't mind doing that either, but so the links will be in the description. This is all from Smogon, but I'm just trying to explain it so that you understand how, I suppose, some of these rules with Little Cup work. They're real, in my opinion. Once you get used to it, I think it's really fun. So enjoy battling Little Cups, and I'll see you next time.